Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Lewis, the Director of Planning and Zoning, and I am the chair for this evening's meeting. So I call this meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. The time is now 6:07 p.m. and it is Tuesday, June 22nd, 2021. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law C-30A, Section 18, and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, as well as Mayor Curtitone's declaration of emergency dated March 15th, 2020. This meeting of the Urban Design Commission will be conducted via remote participation. An audio recording can be provided upon request after the meeting by contacting planning@somervillema.gov. Members of the commission present are myself, Sarah Lewis, representing our co-chair Luisa Oliveira of PSUF is Courtney Kirk this evening, senior planner. We have Frank Valdez, Deborah Fennick, Andrew Abba, and Tim Talon. Joining us are also planner Andrew Graminski, and I'd already mentioned Courtney. So we're going to, it is the chair's prerogative to take items out of order. And so this evening, we're actually going to begin with 15 McGrath. So if the speakers from that team would—
Sarah, real quick,
yes.
We actually have minutes to approve too. First, actually, that's the first agenda item.
Okay, do you want to steer us through that? Because I don't have those dates in front of me.
Sure. So tonight we'll be approving the minutes from the May 11th meeting, 2021.
Can I get a motion to approve those meetings? Are there any comments?
A motion to approve.
We have a second? Seconded by Frank. Okay, roll call vote. Frank Valdez. Deborah Fennick.
Oh, I wasn't present, so can I comment?
Okay. So Andrew Listless, Deborah is abstaining. Andrew Abba.
Yes.
Tim Talon.
Yes.
All right. Unanimous approval of the meeting minutes. So now can we go to 15 McGrath?
I recuse myself from this project.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that, Andrew. I was like trying to juggle.
No, it's fine. It's fine. This way I can go have dinner and then I'll be back for the end.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you. All right, Andrew, you want to unmute some folks?
Yeah, so those who are presenting for this agenda item, if you could please raise your hand. And then if you, who needs to present their screen, if you can identify yourself, that would be greatly appreciated.
Good evening, Mike.
Hey, Sarah, how are you?
I am doing all right.
All right. Well, we're happy to get bumped up in the agenda. We're happy to get going first. So, can I just can I roll with it, Sarah? Ready to go? think that's yes.
Everybody unmuted that needs to be unmuted for
Yeah, yeah, just John and Ian and myself, and I think we're in good shape.
All right, let's go. We're trying to be efficient this evening, and I know this is your second visit. So Andrew is going to give us a 5-minute warning when you hit when you hit the 15-minute mark, so that we can limit the presentations to 20 at most. And just to be fair and equal, he will also do the same to us on the commission.
All right, so in the interest of time, we're gonna get going here. Again, I'm Mike Gerhardt. I'm the development manager with Leggett McCall Properties. We've got John Sullivan and Ian Ramey here with me as well. John's gonna do the bulk or all the presentation, and supported by Ian. So if he could share his screen, that would be fantastic. We're just really excited to be here. Last time we got the massing approved, and we're moving on to facade here. So with that, I will quiet up and let John go for it.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Good to be back in front of the commission. Can everyone see my screen? Okay,
Yes.
great, thank you. Okay, I'll run through the presentation. I thought the last session was very productive, and the feedback that we received was really helpful and pushed the design in the right direction in a way that we feel like has really improved, what we're planning. Let me just move through this initial slides. Last time we had introduced our team, and we really just wanted to highlight, what we heard at the last meeting. So we spent a lot of time, describing the building, describing the site constraints, which played into, a lot of, why the building is shaped and located where it is. And our takeaways were that the jewel box was approved. In terms of the massing approach, we had offered 3 massings, and this one, which we had titled the jewel box, was the preferred one that I think everyone agreed responded, the best to the site conditions and the site opportunities. But what we heard from the commission was that, within the context of this massing, the jewel box piece, which we're trying to emphasize in this important gateway corner, was not differentiated enough and didn't make itself distinct from the rest of the building. And there just was, not a lot of material separation in terms of the components. So that was really, helpful feedback to get, and, something that we took a serious look at in terms of addressing before this meeting. So that's really where our focus has been. We had talked about ideas related to materiality, to depth, to some framing opportunities. We did a lot of studies, and ultimately landed on, what is a preferred approach for us in the context of that discussion. So I can run through, our current thinking. Oops, apologies. And kind of, let the commission know some of the changes that we've made in response to that feedback. So, we looked at a lot of different options, as I had mentioned. Where we landed was on an option that we feel like is really a strong approach to, separate that important corner element and have have a little bit more of an interesting dialogue between the different facade components. The way that we did that was that we felt like, we had a lot of conversation about materiality. We looked at, the introduction of some warmth to the building, particularly at the jewel box element, by introducing vertical fins that will have a warmer kind of dark copper, type of finish, to really accentuate that corner and really pull it forward from the primary facade. We also emphasized the frame around the primary facade itself, along these lines here, which we felt like, helped further, pronounce that corner piece. And then, within the context of all of the different facade types, we took a look at that notch. And again, kind of through some exploration of different ideas, we felt like, a really clean approach to, emphasizing the 2 different facade types was to make that notch very transparent and introduce a different glass that would really allow the other components to separate themselves. So those were kind of the bigger moves that we had made, but there's a lot of detail that we'd like to share as well. So again, looking at, the corner element itself, the bigger ideas were focused on materiality, verticality, and separation. But I think an important thing to note is that we've also looked at it proportionally. So there's a strong horizontal, base datum that we've established that you'll see, some more imagery of as it ties into a, entry canopy. And then we took this element and lifted it up a little bit off of it. And I think you'll see through some of the detail, it feels a little bit more comfortable. Previously, we had the heft of the jewel box coming right down to that horizontal datum, and it felt heavy. And this, I think, plays to further emphasize the distinction of this corner. So again, just to kind of talk about some of the more detailed moves on the primary facade, we have fins and accent panels that introduce kind of a motion to the facade and create a single story rhythm with some horizontal elements that trace around the building. At the jewel box element, we've added warmth and texture, and a vertical emphasis that carries past the floors to really express the jewel box as a whole. And then we've also kind of changed or introduced a little bit more detail to our mechanical penthouse, by providing a vertical stepped kind of angled panel that we feel like ties into some of the verticality of the jewel box and really just provides a little bit more of a scalable, more stepped approach to the top of the building. Getting a little bit closer, you can see some of the depth relationships, the typical fins, the accent panels. Oops. I'm sorry. You can see the fins and the accent panels that give the primary facade some depth, and again that motion that we referred to. You can see the transparency of the notch, which is inset, but also is contained by these larger wrapping moments to really accentuate that depth, which we feel like is a nice break and between the two volumes. And then you can see the depth and the rhythm of these warmer fins, which we find very interesting. And again, introducing kind of that darker copper or kind of a cleaner version of a Corten finish, into the mix, we think really makes a bold statement at that element. We also, you can kind of see it a little bit in this view, but this building will be, kind of experienced, from an oblique angle, as driving up and down McGrath. And I think these vertical fins will be, add a layer of interest as you see the sides of them. They'll turn, more opaque. They'll kind of open up when you're near the entry, and then when you're approaching from the side, they'll, give you a good sense of that color and that texture. Moving towards the entry, we've explained some of the larger elements on the body of the building, but kind of taking it down to the pedestrian scale, you can see the notch here to the left that terminates in the building entry. There is the horizontal datum that I was talking about before with that important reveal, exists above the first level, and it kind of ties both sides of the building together, but it's more pronounced at the side of our building that has more of the active program, specifically the entry and some of our amenity space. And we think that that's an opportunity to add in some more pedestrian friendly details and give the building a little bit more of scaled down moment beneath that canopy. So some warmer wood elements with some lighting components at the underside or the soffit of the canopy element, some stronger stone-like panels that express the piers, opportunity for some green walls and some planting, and then again you can kind of see the relationship above to the jewel box to the notch. And this just gives you a sense as you're approaching the site a little bit more from McGrath. You can see the depth of those fins, the reveal, the strong, horizontal organizational moment, and then, again, this more pedestrian, friendly, realm underneath this horizontal moment. We also had presented last time kind of a view looking back towards the city. And there's some good commentary about the relationship between the primary facade and this facade that faces the west of our site that is more needs to be more solid in nature. So this is what we had shared with the group last time. Some good conversation about that feeling kind of like a two-dimensional flat interplay between the two facades. So we looked at that a little bit more closely, and we'll share this image tonight, which I think kind of shows a few things. Some of what we've already described, like the kind of the interest and the distinction of the jewel box itself, the presence of that notch, the rhythm of the primary facade with these stronger kind of wrapping elements. And these wrapping elements actually turn the corner and contain, this facade and express as a notch on the other, kind of on the other side, so that this facade can break down into 2 volumes. We've turned the glass around the corner for a module, and then have incorporated the same pattern that's experienced on the front facade around the corner, but have kind of inverted it so that there's more solid panels with more narrow windows, but it's that same rhythm. And these are intended to be metal panels that relate and finish to what's being expressed on the primary facade of the building. So we feel like this reads more as a unified volume, which serves to further kind of pronounce the corner and use these notches to really create a nice relationship between the volumes. You can also see the rhythm in the you can see the rhythm in the you can see the rhythm in the penthouse language as well. And then this diagram just shows again how we've used those smaller, more subtle, but detailed wrapping elements that do have some depth associated with them to really, unify these volumes. And we think this is just a cleaner approach and one that's a little bit more holistic than what we had shared last time. And then this just gives you a sense of a little bit of the detail. This is now kind of looking from the community path. And I will say this image has a little bit of a bronze feel, which is not the intent. The intent is more like the last image that has materials that are kind of in that lighter palette that are tied together. But this gives you a sense of the, the notch on the more solid side of the building, and a similar treatment, towards the community path where that, main portion of the building turns the corner, and these framing elements, start to hold some of the facade on this side with another notch introduced here. So with that, we just wanted to share that as an update. We're excited by the, the evolution. We feel like it was very helpful feedback to receive last time, and we feel like we're in a much better place, than we were during the last meeting, because now we feel like that jewel box really does, provide a distinct difference from the remainder of the building. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions, and we're happy to share other images from the last meeting and some other supporting material if that's helpful.
So the penthouse, what is the material? I mean, you said it's more related to the main body of the building. It's a little hard to tell. It feels a little between, the copper color and the whatever. I can't quite tell what it is. It's sort of warm, so I can't tell, what it's aligning itself with.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's I think it would be a little bit more of a pewter feel, kind of a darker gray, but with a little bit of a warmer tone. But it's meant to tie to some of the darker gray framing elements and fins that are on the body of the building. So it's meant to speak to the body of the building, but the vertical depth and rhythm plays a little bit off of these fins.
Got it. Okay. And then when you say what is it? The part of the glass section, the frame that separates itself, is the jewel box in the body of the building. Is that, are you suggesting like a low-E glazing or something so it's more transparent? You had characterized it as being more transparent.
Yeah, we're trying to.
Not low-E, I meant low iron. Sorry.
Low iron. Yeah. That's what I was hearing. Yeah, we're trying to get kind of an ultra clear glass just for those limited moments. But I think that'll provide a nice separation between the other two volumes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And John, you also mentioned that notch would be inset, the glazing there from the adjacent facades. Is that right?
It is, yeah. I'll just try to move to that image. It is, it's in about a foot. The notch is in about a foot, but the fin that wraps it is also out about a foot. So I think it presents itself like a 2-foot, inset moment. And there's a little, play in that dimension, but it's meant to be a break, but we're also using that wrapping element to emphasize that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. So maybe I'll jump in first. I think overall the organization of the facades and the clarification of materiality have really come a long way since the last meeting, and I think really make for a much stronger and better building. I really like the introduction of the warmer material, the vertical fins on the jewel box piece, the separation of it from the adjacent facades, the notch, separation from the canopy below, and also the clarification of what you've done at I guess it's the western corner, adjacent to the more solid side of the building with the glass wrapping, and a similar patterning between the solid and more transparent facades that still makes it feel like one building, but clearly something separate related to the specific adjacencies and design of those sides. I had a couple detailed questions. One was on the canopy. You had the view looking into the entry. And I wonder, so there's the canopy, which again, I think is really nice, is an organizing element, separating the jewel box from the ground plane. It appears that it's extending kind of to the left side of this image, beyond with a green wall below. Could you talk a little about that and the idea for what's going on there, the separation between the ground level and the floors above?
Yeah, sure. No, that's a good question. So this, this is the canopy, and this carries all the way to the corner, kind of the far end of the jewel box. And if you, from the last presentation, everything to the entry into page right is our active kind of front of house, program. So the canopy we pulled out to identify that and to give some more depth there. It's also how people will arrive, and it gives them a little bit of cover as part of that arrival experience. And then everything to the kind of page left of our entry is back of house uses. Last presentation we had talked about kind of some of the constraints on the ground floor and how we needed to organize it. So we were pulling this out to emphasize this side of the building again as our more active side. And then this reveal, we kind of wanted to create that consistent horizontal datum because it felt, comfortable. But this serves more as a channel to support the primary facade above it, and then just returns a modest amount to allow that wall to sit in. That again will be mostly a solid wall, but we feel like it's a good opportunity for planting or some kind of definition along those lines. So it's an intentional break, but it's kind of because it's framing two different programs and two different conditions.
Yeah, I guess it makes a lot of sense for the entry lobby and the more active side of the building. I just wonder if it needs to continue as strongly on the left-hand side. You had a diagram that showed the idea of actually breaking that horizontal datum and differentiating between the two sides. It feels pretty continuous with strong horizontal datum. The other thing with the planted wall, I wonder how deep that would really want to be to just make sure rain is hitting it, has access to water and things like that.
Yeah, that's a good comment. That's something we could certainly look at in terms of how that horizontal, could continue. And then for the green wall, we're mindful of some of the conditions, but it is south facing, so we do feel like there's a good, there's a good opportunity there.
Yeah. And I guess so we've focused a lot on the building itself. I know one thing we kind of talked at the end of the last meeting about was the public realm, and I understand that there's a lot of discussion going on with Mass DOT and with the city related to the public realm, the sidewalk, the pedestrian spaces along McGrath. I know we as a Urban Design Commission have spent a lot of time focused on that on other projects. Understand that well, maybe you can speak to the kind of the status of the design of that.
I can say a little bit. We do have Ian Ramey from Copley Wolf here, so he can talk about kind of the landscape design for for the site. We have some other material that we could pull up if that's of interest. And Mike Gerhardt, you may be able to speak better to all of the coordination that's been happening with Mass DOT and the plans that the city and the state have for the McGrath improvements.
Sure. So we recently received plans from DOT that outline their planned improvements for McGrath Highway in this zone, which include right in front of our building installing a floating bus stop as well as separated bike lanes. So we're in the process, and that's all within the public realm. So we're still in the process of coordinating with DOT on how that's all going to work out with our entrance package. We do have a permitting process we'll have to go through with DOT, but they've got plans that basically take the sidewalk renovation and expansion and of this whole McGrath Highway striping floating bus stop right up to our property line. So we've taken it from the property line in a landscaping and site improvement package, but from the property line out, there's gonna be a follow-on process with DOT to figure out what that all looks like going forward. So we can talk about from the property line in and our design intent there. We have some materials that we can display there if we want some more. If you'd like to see some more detail, and Ian can walk you through the thought process and design of that.
I can add a little bit as well, just for general background information. So we are still meeting with DOT to understand what the Rufo Road intersection looks like and what at the intersection, what's called the jug handle looks like. So how this site will be accessed vehicularly is different than will probably be different than what we see on the site plan as it stands today, just because of what DOT is thinking with those intersections. So essentially, the last conversations have been that the jug handle is wanted to be a full intersection, and the Rufo Road intersection sort of simplified. And that has to do with access to the community path and coordination with Cambridge as well. So there is still some, as Mike mentioned, moving pieces, no pun intended.
Yeah, and Sarah, I know we had a meeting with DOT last week, and we did show them. So they provided some conceptual designs for the intersection prepared by Tool. We had some conceptual designs prepared by VHB that would continue to allow kind of the Rufo Road intersection to be simplified, but function in a similar fashion to how it functions now, but simplifying the light operations while also accommodating enhanced pedestrian and bicycle crossing safety measures and crosswalks and bike lanes and access to this new community path extension from McGrath or Monsignor O'Brien up to the MBTA without precluding potentially adding a light at the jug handle. So as you said, Sarah, there are some moving pieces that are going to have to be reconciled moving forward, but there's I think a collaboration coming together with the various developers along here to come to a solution that really benefits all, including the public and the bike ped community, to really make this intersection work in a much more efficient and safe fashion. So we're excited about that opportunity.
I think that sounds great. It sounds like all the right discussions are happening. I think I'd love to hear from Ian about what's going on inside the property line, but ultimately kind of where I'm going is just hoping that there is the flexibility inside the property line to accommodate whatever's happening outside the property line, especially if that sidewalk needs to expand inboard of the property line or shift in to accommodate planting at the curb edge or whatever the width of the cycle track is going to be, or however else that section evolves.
So would it be better to review this once things have settled down a little bit, or do we feel like there are things that aren't going to change no matter how things settle?
I think there are things that aren't going to change in as much as the entryway, the easement across the front of the property. It might be that primary car traffic goes in the Rufo Road side and truck traffic comes in the jug handle area. but essentially it's going to remain mostly the same. It's more about the movements that might actually change as to which vehicles go where. But what you're seeing is as public realm, where the right in front of the building, the front door, I think will remain the same regardless. Yes, thank you. Perfect timing. So I'll be quiet and let Ian go.
Well, thanks. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so this is a planned blow up that shows kind of what's happening between the McGrath right of way and the front of the building. And as John had kind of touched on during his presentation, we're really trying to have a welcoming pedestrian experience and turn that shared drive condition, that vehicular condition, into something that feels pedestrianized, that feels like a plaza, that has some active patterning that's interesting and engaging and kind of leads the eye towards the key entry into the building. The landscape strip that is along the property line is about 15 feet wide, as currently shown. And what we're trying to do there, knowing that McGrath is going to be, even in its newly configured configuration, is going to be a very busy street, trying to really kind of heavy up the landscape there and to introduce some kind of structural elements in the form of planters. Those planters may have materials that speak to what's happening on the facade of the building. So there's, some tie-in there between the building and the site. Those planters would be raised elements that will get the planting soils up above grade. That will help with some of the salt spray and things like that that you see associated with these roads. And then within those raised planters, we want to have a really kind of organic, multi-stem planting configuration of trees, so that having a really dense and diverse kind of plant buffer, basically, that separates that more protected plaza area from the busyness of McGrath. The other idea there with these things being slightly elevated is that we're sort of embracing this idea of a portal or a passage where pedestrians come out of the public way, they pass through these planter elements, and then get into this more, kind of welcoming plaza condition that goes into the front activated facade of the building. So that's kind of an overview of the front part. I think we have some other slides if you want to run through those as well, really quickly. Green score, we comply with the minimums. We do have an ample kind of swath of planting that's on the north side abutting the MBTA property. So there's a lot of value there in terms of the green score that we can use to meet those requirements. And then we cut some simple sections. One is through the front of the building. So the building front is on the right-hand side of the view. McGrath is on the left-hand side. You can see the traffic and things like that. We haven't really indicated how the bike lanes and the bus configuration works yet, because we don't really know exactly what that final layout will be. We did show the idea of a street tree. We met with PSUF a couple weeks ago with Louisa and Andrew. They asked us to look at potentially coordinating with DOT when the time is right to see if we can have some street trees within that 10-foot wide public sidewalk. Again, with a caveat that, we don't really know what DOT is going to end up doing ultimately, but it would be nice if we can to have some street trees there. And then within our property line, you can see that raised planter element, the planting mass that we have there, and then that wide kind of shared drive that engages with the first floor recessed use.
So is there the flexibility to take that back of sidewalk line and move it into the property line, which would shallow up the width of the planting strip?
Well, right now it's a 10-foot width sidewalk from the property line to the existing curb. The preliminary plans that we saw looks like they're maintaining that 10-foot width of sidewalk, and everything else that they're proposing is kind of outboard of the curb and basically putting McGrath on a road diet, kind of getting that infrastructure from the curb inside, from the curb face towards the main part of the road. So hopefully we can kind of keep the sidewalk line as it is and not diminish that buffer too much.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage you all to really think about someone that's waiting for a bus. I know sometimes the floating bus stops, they're pretty small. You know, if someone is shopping at Star Market, they have a carriage, something like that, they're going to wait for a bus. It's likely that they'll actually wait around the sidewalk area and lean on your planter, maybe sit in your planter, sit on your address sign wall. So I would encourage you to think about in relation to where you want your nice planting to stay nice, that, you know, you think about someone waiting for the bus. I mean, they'll probably even sit on the blue bike station. So just think about the users, public using the bus stop.
Sure. Yeah, I think there's opportunities that we can maybe introduce some dedicated seating shelves sort of integrated with the planters potentially.
I really like the planted buffer. I like the idea of tying in the materiality to the facade material, the vertical fins and the planter walls. That could be really nice as well. It feels like the building itself is very buffered from McGrath, but for the pedestrian realm, the sidewalk isn't. So I get, if McGrath's going on a road diet and we're using a travel lane and there's the opportunity kind of outboard of the curb to add that with a dense row of street trees and buffer there, I guess that changes that. But I guess, I went out there after our meeting 2 weeks ago and took a walk down the sidewalk there, and it really is brutal as a pedestrian realm today.
Yes.
I guess that's what I'd like to see, a real buffering element in between the travel lanes on McGrath and the sidewalk walking space.
There ends up being a really significant separation between the curb line of the travel lane and the pedestrian sidewalk in front of the building, just by the buildup of the. And I have it diagrammed if I could share it if anybody wants to see it. But between the floating bus stop, the bike travel lane, then the sidewalk, the planting area, so there ends up being a pretty significant separation from the vehicular traffic to the pedestrian realm, which will be nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also appreciate the material, the material compatibility or restatement with the planter wall support, the weathered steel planters and the copper color that's been introduced. I think that's an interesting, I think it's a really successful way of making that section distinct. And I really appreciate actually the view from on McGrath looking actually towards Boston. And it's the relationship of sort of that facade becomes sort of solid because, if you're tight enough up to the divider and you see it as a solid in relationship to the brick building and maybe the brick building in the foreground. Yeah, so I feel like it starts to tie in. I was going to ask, can it repeat anywhere else? And I love seeing it repeat in the landscape, where you can actually, becomes a tactile thing. So I think that's really good. I think the area that needs more development for me is where the facade, the main facade, turns the corner to the more solid facade, the short solid facade. It's sort of not taking from the language of the section that divides the jewel box from the rest of the building. It doesn't, so it's not framed the way that is. And the rhythm, the sort of the alternating verticals that you have appear on both facades, which I think is nice in of themselves, but the way it's resolved as the corner turns, I think isn't successful yet. I feel like should it step itself, that solid thing, or should it be framed? And I think, or should it even turn as glass? I'm not sure I mind it actually not, the glass not turning, those being framed sections. So I think they have a good, pattern scale material relationship with those two facades. One becomes more solid, the other is more solid, the other one's more open. So I would encourage you to look at that corner because I think it's it's not here nor there. But I do appreciate what you've done with the introduction of the copper color and what that does to sort of settle the building to some extent in the context that it's sitting in. So those are my comments.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think we can certainly look at some more detail around how those materials transition. We do like that it's kind of contained by this wrap because it creates kind of like one larger volume as opposed to the multiple pieces as part of the last iteration. But I appreciate those ideas. A different way to turn the corner or step it and kind of accentuate some of that rhythm. So I think at a detail level that could, we could look at some options there, and I think it could be helpful.
All right, we have 5 minutes. We're approaching our 40-minute point. So I just leave that out there to all to decide how to move forward.
Frank, do you have any comments?
No, I mean, I think that you guys have made very good comments. I mean, I appreciate, John, all the work that you did in trying to identify the jewel box as to really that piece that we were asking for. I think that the gestures in the facade are successful, and I think that you've achieved that. I think that that's what we asked you to do per our last meeting when looking at the facades, and I think that you have done that. So I feel that you have taken it to a level that is satisfactory to and I am willing to vote on it right now.
Thank you, Frank. Great.
All right. Okay, in that case, are there any more comments from the commission? Deborah, Tim, are you good?
Yeah, I think in general, yes. My question would be how to address, it's not a criticism of the project team, it's just the reality of where the project is at, but just the fact that the frontage along McGrath isn't resolved yet. That design, we haven't reviewed that tonight.
I think that's something that we can make sure is included in the report coming out of this. And perhaps that's something that as it gets resolved, I can come back and give you an update on our interactions with DOT. And if the plan does change significantly, then perhaps it gets conditioned by the planning board for a revisit to the UDC later. Is that potentially a solution?
It basically becomes conditions, right? We're putting conditions on those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree. I would support that.
Okay, so yeah, I think that's fine. So it would then be clear to the planning board that that's not something we've really reviewed yet, at least in its final state. Then it would be up to them to decide how they wanted to deal with that. They wanted to send it back to us or just address it during the planning board process.
Yeah, I think that's right, but it would be clear in the recommendation report that goes to the planning board that is the case.
Okay.
All right, then I believe Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we already voted on the preferred schematic design. And that was this scheme. So then it was the modifications. Can I get do we think that, so there are things that we need to make motions on. I'm going to start with the design modification one because I think that goes to the conversation we just had regarding the, I'm going to call it the public realm for the site plan. So can we get a motion that the commission would like to make sure the planning board is aware that they did not review and approve the final public realm improvements due to the lack of resolution with DOT at this point in time.
Yes, I'll motion that.
And I second.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, did you get all that?
Yes, I did.
Okay, excellent. All right, then we will do a roll call vote. Frank,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
Tim.
Yes.
All right, motion carries. So then the next vote is whether the guidelines have been satisfied, and whether there is a priority design guideline that you would like to emphasize. So given what I've heard, I don't think there is a priority guideline, given that the work that was done on the revision that we're looking at. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So I think our final motion needs to be that the guidelines have been appropriately satisfied.
I
Sarah, we
motion
also,
to- Go
sorry,
ahead,
I don't mean to
Andrew.
interrupt, but there's also the facade vote.
Correct. It's
Thank you. Okay.
So I motion that the design guidelines and the facade have been met.
We have a second.
Second?
Seconded. All right, roll call vote. Frank?
Yes.
Can I ask first, the comments that we made, are those incorporated in, or is that another vote, or?
No, all the comments will be, the pertinent comments will be listed in the report. So we don't actually have to vote on those, but they will be in the report, and I believe you get to review those drafts, so.
Super.
Okay, so we have a yes from Frank. Deborah?
Yes.
Motion, okay, and Tim?
Yes.
All right, so I believe that is the guidelines and the facade. Andrew, are there any other procedurals? Or can we say congratulations?
I believe that there is a vote to actually provide any additional recommendations to the design,
Okay,
at least according to the website votes. So we've made the vote on the design guidelines, the preferred facade option. Last week we voted on last meeting we voted on the preferred massing option. And then we identified any outstanding concerns. That's from regards to the public realm. And then there's provide advice and recommendations concerning the satisfaction of design standards and guidelines from the Somerville zoning ordinance. No, that's not it. I think then we're all set, actually.
No, yeah, I think that, Andrew, I think that we voted on all of the ones that are called by the zoning ordinance. So
Yes. Yep.
because we didn't raise that issue that you're bringing up, so we haven't raised that. So I think that we're
Okay.
all good.
All right.
all right. Well
All right.
then, thank you.
43
everyone.
minutes. Not bad.
Congratulations.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the commission's time.
Great.
Have a good evening.
You too.
All right, so then next we have, oh, I lost my Post-it note. I think it was something on Albion. Andrew, help me. Oh, there it is,
Yes.
59
59
Albion Street.
Albion Street.
So can we have who has ever, oh, there I see one raised hand. Everybody knows. Raise your hand so you can be unmuted. All right, so once again, I am going to remind the applicant that you have 20 minutes to present. You will hear a 5-minute warning mark at the 15-minute point. And so I think we are ready whenever you are.
Okay. Hi, everyone. It says I'm sharing a screen, but it's not clear which screen I'm sharing right now. So do you see a PDF with a, no.
No, we need to go to webinar. Let's get started page.
Let's try this.
That works.
How about that? Okay, great. We'll close out this. So hi, everyone. My name is Marilyn Modinger, and I am the architect for this project at 59 Albion Street. We are about to get much smaller in scale than the previous project. And I'm just curious, I think we understand that we are the first backyard cottage to go through this process. Is that true? Okay, hooray, here we are. Okay, yeah, we've had our first neighborhood meeting, which went very well, and we're excited to present to y'all tonight. So I'm gonna jump right in. All right, full screen here, might as well. All right, so this was our little write-up that we provided for y'all. So 59 Albion Street. What we're doing is a little backyard cottage. As far as the backyard cottage process goes, it is not a by right project, although we are following, because we have to come before all of you, but it is, we're following all the guidelines that have been given to us. So as a baseline, that's where we are. There was, well, first, let's make sure we know where everyone knows where 59 Albion Street is. So that's where it is. The owners are on the call right now, so I don't know if they're unmuted or on video. It's a little hard to tell what's going on here, but they are on the call as well. So here are existing conditions, just to get everyone up to speed. So the house at 59 Albion is this sweet little red house with a mansard roof. And you can see there's this pit in the background here in the backyard. And that is from a existing barn that was taken down last year. A little bit of context on this project. We have been working with these clients for about 3 years now on trying to get this backyard cottage. So it's been quite an exciting process, going through historic to talk about the barn, trying to save the barn, realizing the barn was not savable, having the zoning change. So here we are today. So that's why we are showing some of these things, which show some process that already happened. So that was the existing barn that was there. It was structurally really severely compromised. It was there was about 2 feet of fill against it. It had been draining against it for a very long time. So we ended up, after going through the historic process, taking down the barn. I have a few diagrams here that reference the size of the previous barn with the size of building that we're proposing to put back. So our proposed building is the yellow one, and the existing or previously existing barn is the blue one. So it's a lot shorter and just a different shape. And we are up on a bit of a rise, I guess. So the neighbor behind, this is their view of each of those two. So yeah, and just a little section diagram to just bring it on home that what we're proposing is a lot smaller, and again fits with the guidelines that we have been given for backyard cottages. A landscape plan here, I'm going to ask Elise, who is on the call, I believe, to hopefully she was unmuted. She's our landscape architect. She can speak to our landscape plan a little bit. We're not necessarily required to provide this, I don't believe, but it's a big part of what we're up to. So I think it's important to see. I don't know if Elise is there. That's okay. I can pinch hit. I don't play to be landscape architect, but I can pinch hit.
Marilyn, can you hear me now?
Yes, there you are, Elise.
I am unmuted. Yes.
Okay.
It would have been great if I had thrown in a previously existing condition, but what we are looking to do here is to, we're actually shortening the driveway. Can you see the mouse? If I move the mouse? There we go, Marilyn, that works. So the existing driveway used to go all the way down to the barn. So what we are doing is we are shortening the driveway and reducing kind of the impervious paving, and creating a small play lawn in the back, which is fairly consistent with, if you look at sort of the surrounding yards, what the sort of yard space is. And then we are adding a small terrace between the existing home and the proposed cottage that sort of connects those two elements. And then, as much as we can, getting in some planting of some native trees, small trees and shrubs. Trying to think what else. And sort of tucking in some places for raised planters along the side of the house, along the existing, in the existing driveway area. What else am I missing? I think that's it. Just trying to sort of reconsider, think about ways to reallocate the space to get a lot more out of it than what was previously there before. With the larger barn, there really wasn't much yard space for the kids to play, and now they'll have that, as well as less driveway and a great little backyard cottage.
Yeah, and that's a great reminder too. I should have introduced our clients a little bit so that you know who are the owners who are on this call as well. Kate and Daryl bought this house about 6 years ago, and they plan on staying in this house. This is their forever home, and they have 2 kids, and they want to make it into a space that really works for raising their children here in Somerville. So the realities of all that, having a space to play, having legit real parking spaces for them, not reducing the amount of parking, but then also making sure to have practical family things like trash and recycling area, raised planters for tomato plants and things like that. So the backyard cottage itself, you saw in our application, is a non-commercial building. It is not planned to be used as a residence or as a rental or anything. It is strictly used as recreational space for the owners. So that's the focus. We're putting a bathroom in, but we are not putting a full kitchen in, and we are not extending the driveway, which would mean that we cannot use it as a residential unit, and that is not what the owners want to do. So it is strictly for them, recreational purposes. So elevations, I'm showing all 4 of them. If you saw the packet ahead of time, I guess technically we only need to show and discuss the one that faces the front lot line. This is a little bit funny because the one that faces the front lot line is right here. So, okay, so we're following the rules. So that's this facade right here. But we have designed the rest of the building because it's little and we can't really design the facade outside of thinking about the inside. We've also been in a design process on this building for so long that it's actually already designed on the inside. When you're working with such a small building, you can't leave that till later. So all of these windows are placed according to what's on the inside. The rear facade, these are the sort of the other two facades. And you know, some inspiration images here. The idea is to a modern barn, a play on a modern barn space that has space for hanging out. It's pretty straightforward, I suppose. We are providing some elevation variations here as required. So our first variation is the one that I showed you originally. In this one, we're using a horizontal lap siding. We imagine we will be painting this dark. When I show it rendered dark, then all you see is black squares. So we're not showing the color, but you can imagine this sort of color palette, darker colors, warm cedar, things like that. So simple horizontal lap siding to pay respect to the types of vernacular buildings that would be that are quite common around Somerville. And with black windows and trim, and then we would do a cedar accent wrapping the corner, which you saw here. So wrapping the corner and collecting these sort of two entrances around this little deck. Another variation is to try some vertical siding. That would be fun. So we could do vertical siding or board and batten type siding. And here we remove the cedar accent, but here we have a sort of a trellis and a different sort of arrangement of windows. And finally, we could go inspired in another direction with a shake. Again, we played with the windows here a little bit, but I understand that it may not seem like we're really showing too many window arrangements. And that's the idea behind this diagram. So this shows you where the interior walls are. The building essentially is a small split level. So you enter at this level and then you immediately go up to a small loft, or you go down to a story here. There's actually going to be a climbing wall inside there. So we need the double height space for the climbing wall at the rear. And then under here is sort of storage. So we're trying to slip a window. In this one, we're slipping a window in here, and the others we're playing with maybe that's just more blank facade for plantings to go up against it. But this window up here, there's not, I mean, yes, we could move it over. I tried different sizes, but it starts, there's just not, it's a little building. So then obviously we're playing with whether you do a slider or a swing door. By code, one of these has to be a swing door as an egress. So in this situation, we'd have two doors, one swing on the side and one slider here. In this case, obviously we'd have to have a swing door on the other side. But again, I know it's really nitpicky, but there isn't that much room to kind of really try a whole bunch of different things. We also want to keep consistent window sizes, and these are stock window sizes from Pella that we're interested in using, double hung, that kind of thing. So there they are without the pesky red lines. That is our presentation. So happy to talk through any questions you might have. I really feel like we just zoomed way in from what we were just looking at, which is kind of fun. Yeah, so happy to take questions or anything else.
It is intriguing, Marilyn. It is the first time that we are reviewing something with the scale, so it is a learning curve for us as well. So it's, you know, I have one question basically on the whole thing, and I think that what you've done is great, and I think that your approach is perfect. What the materiality that you keep showing, whether it's horizontal or vertical or shingle, I'm assuming that is a cement panel of some kind?
Yeah, we'd be looking to use hardy plank. Yep.
Right. In your renderings, you keep showing the cement panel coming all the way to the ground, and it, you know, usually, you know, for cement panels, there's a requirement or there's a preferred idea that you keep it a little bit above the ground for the idea that snow accumulates or anything, so that it should be above. And that's the one thing that I would say that, you know, the idea of bringing the cement panel all the way to the ground might not be the best approach for the material, as it obviously is not recommended and it deteriorates pretty readily. And the idea of creating an alternative type of base in which that material hits, whether it's horizontal, vertical, or shingle, I really have not necessarily any preference of them. But I think that whether it's a granite base or some type of a, you know, CMU base or anything that it ends above the floor line, I think that it would be helpful for the design overall. I think that in the integrity of the facade and the material.
Yeah, and that's a great comment and a sharp eye. And I just want to be clear that we are doing that as far as so this right here is exposed concrete.
Sure.
Yeah, so because absolutely we can't have that. So this is the deck. So we are 12 inches. Our first cellulosic material is 12 inches above grade for sure. And the hardy would not start until 12 inches above grade. So where you're seeing this gray is exposed concrete.
Okay.
I have a sort of procedural question. Was there anything in the historic commission review that we're supposed to be cognizant of as we review this, or?
I don't think that this is I don't think that this is a historical neighborhood.
I
This is
do
not a
not-
local historical, what is it? Local historical
Historic district.
But the
district,
fact that
LHD.
the fact that the barn was there is just sort of incidental. It just sort of was. Okay.
As I understand it, yeah, this is not, there isn't anything that we need to be cognizant of from
We
HPC.
would have gotten a report from them.
Okay. That was I guess the one question. So the rear elevation, that's just exposed concrete on the neighbor's yard, is that correct?
It is, yes. And that is the forces that are generated from the rock climbing wall are pretty intense. So it has to be a solid concrete wall.
It doesn't seem like the friendliest facade to expose to the neighbor's side, especially, I mean, I understand that this was previously a barn that was not great, but I would imagine that the facade on the barn was probably, you know, fairly nice. And I would hope that there's some way to do something a little bit better than that. How tall is that concrete on that edge?
This right here is about 8 feet, probably right here. The grade does drop off. There's existing retaining wall. This has been quite an ordeal. There's existing retaining wall that the barn had collapsed backwards. And so at one time it was certainly nice. At the time we took the barn down for the last few years, it was not. It was pretty rough. But I agree, there are certainly some things we could do here. You know, I certainly have some ideas about what we could do there if this was a problem. The detailing gets tricky, but obviously we can figure that out.
Well, are you
Yeah.
considering like a form liner finish, or
No,
or
just-
any other treatment to the or coloring of the concrete or anything like that?
No. I also just, I'm just curious also, like, these facades are not, we weren't required to submit them. Maybe I shouldn't have. So I'm just curious, this is my procedural question as an architect working in Somerville, what sort of the conversation is, what we're, you know, I'm happy to talk about all facades. I'm just sort of curious what we're.
That's a great question.
As far as I know, I was only supposed to submit the front facade.
It is a very good point, Marilyn. It is a very good point.
It's a very good point, and I think technically it's whatever is visible from the street. So it is primarily the front facade, but
Otherwise, all the buildings, we would be talking about the rear facades of them.
I mean, the only person that would have an issue with that facade would be, the only person that would have an issue with that facade, technically, it's nobody really in the public realm, is the neighbor on the opposite end. And we haven't heard anything from somebody living in, you know, Woodbine Street who says, you know, they have an issue with it. So
I sort of following up on that.
that'd be correct.
Is any of this really visible from the public realm? Like it seems based on the like just barely.
The way that I understand what we are supposed to be submitting is the facade, and we are supposed to talk about facade variations for the facade. So when I look up what facade means, according to the ordinance, it is the face of the building that is oriented towards the front lot line. So I read that to be this. And when I talked with our team who's helping usher us through planning, they confirmed that it is this facade right here, which is why I focused on that. It does seem, between you, me, and the public, it does seem kind of strange, but that's what
I think if
that's
this
following the letter of it.
Yeah, I think if this were rendered with the actual landscape plan on it too, there's a gate and trees there. Like it's not visible at all.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, it's not.
it's going to be the idea with those trees there is that, you know, they're Amelanchier, which is, it's a, 15, 20 foot multi-stem tree to actually give them some privacy. It's not a wall, but, to help screen.
So basically, if I understand it correctly, everything that this project is doing is by right per the new zoning. They're doing everything within the right of the, the new code. So it's saying that we are privy to a review of the elevation that is facing the main street. You presented 3 patterns of elevations. I'm really not going to sit here and say to you personally, myself, that I prefer horizontal, vertical, or shingle. I think that they're all successful. You seem to be a qualified architect, hired, by your, I think that you're doing a great job. And I would leave it up to really you and your client to pick what is the most appropriate within the context of the neighborhood and what you're presenting. I don't think it's for me to give you a selection of a pattern. If that's what we are privy to do, I think that you've done a great job in the massing. I think that it's doing everything within the zoning, and I think it's a great addition to it. Even great that it's a climbing wall for kids. I like that.
I agree with Frank. I think it's a really elegant little building. Congratulations
That's my opinion.
to the owners for getting
And I would
through
vote.
3 years of process. That's a long time.
We're not
Or-
through yet. We're getting close.
We're progressing through 3 years of process. I only had one comment, and that's just a question for you, Marilyn. I'm curious if you can talk to your approach. I know that there's been a couple notes that say colors are shown really only diagrammatically. I think one of the renderings showed a black roof, and maybe the existing mansard roof is black as well. I'm just curious about your approach to kind of color and materiality, especially as it relates to the existing home on the site.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. These images right here, I think give the best view. So we're looking to do primarily a dark structure. What we have currently in our drawings is a corrugated galvalume roof, which is a very typical barn type roof. So it would be shiny silver. So I picked all the things that are hard to do in like quick renderings. This isn't quite the project with the rendering budget that our previous project had. So it would be very similar to these, darker, earthier dark colors with these pops of cedar, and the sort of that metal roof, corrugated metal roof.
So clearly different from the existing home.
Yes, so the existing home has, so it would be a darker contrasting, but maybe similar in terms of a light colored roof, but not like the heavy white trim around everything, sort of the more monochromatic.
I think it's nice. It demurs to the home, and it satisfies, I think the needs or the cottage, the backyard cottage requirements. And I would just support any, anything that you and the owner feel is the appropriate material pattern for this, for the design. And I assume that's the one that you featured, in some of your drawings, right?
I think this one's our favorite. Yeah, the one that we showed kind of as part of, it seems to work the best. I think the owners like having this window looking down in. The slider is nice. We're waiting to see what the latest is on the question that's coming before City Council about the deck. We may have to remove this deck. So there's a new rule about whether decks can be within the 10 foot. So buildings have to be separated by 10 feet. There's now talking about whether the decks also have to be separated by 10 feet. If that's the case, this will become a patio and we'll sort of miss kind of this cool wraparound with the steps. But we're gonna we'll roll with the punches.
Flush deck and then drop the play lawn down.
What's that?
Maybe a flush deck and then drop the play lawn down 6 inches on that edge.
Oh, that,
That one's free. So maybe break our land speed record, and I don't know if we want to go ahead and vote.
Yep.
Yeah.
Alrighty then. I'm scrolling through the ordinance right now to figure out what we actually need to vote on. There are some design standards within the backyard cottage itself. Those have been met. They are not guidelines, they are standards, so those have already been met. The design guidelines under the NR district have more to do with, because it's short, how about I read them just so that we know, and it's more about privacy. Ground dwelling unit should be elevated above the grade of any adjacent sidewalk so that the window sills of the dwelling unit are at or above the eye level of passing pedestrians. This elevation change maintains privacy for occupants while also encouraging open blinds or curtains to allow natural daylight into the unit. Number 2, dormer and sidewall window locations should break the direct line of sight between neighboring properties to every extent practicable. Translucent glass on the bottom half of windows or strategically placed landscape elements should be utilized if it is not practical to offset windows in such a way as to minimize privacy impacts. Outdoor amenity spaces that are elevated, such as roof decks, fully projecting balconies, and upper story rear porches, should provide sight obscuring visual screening at the sides to increase privacy, security, and to limit views of abutting properties from elevated vantage points. Obviously, those are intended not necessarily for backyard cottages. Depending on, as there is very little view from the distance to the street, I don't think we need to worry about that one so much. I suppose the question might be on the side elevations abutting property lines, whether that's something that you would like the lower windows to be half opaque. I think that's in the realm of discussion. Otherwise, I think the only vote we need to take is that the design guidelines have been met.
Motion that the design guidelines have been met.
Andrew Graminsky, is that your understanding as well?
Yes, and just to confirm, it sounds like the commission is leaving it up to the architect and client to come up with the preferred front facade. So I guess should that then be a vote, just that the commission moves that the client chooses the best approach for the facade option.
Or Marilyn, is the preferred the one that you have presented to us as the preferred?
That is the
Or
preferred.
they're just
one.
choose the preferred.
Maybe it's more straightforward to just say we approve the preferred, the one you presented as the preferred.
Okay, so then I say I need a motion that the preferred schematic design and the meets the design guidelines, and all design guidelines have been met.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Tim. All right, roll call vote. Deborah,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
and Frank.
Yes.
All right, congratulations, team.
Thank you.
You have an approved project, and you did make it within your time allotted. So we
Great.
thank you so much.
Just to be clear, because I just went out for 1 second for me, that we made sure to approve this one. I've been down this road for 3 years now, so we approved this one. Okay.
That's it.
Great.
Yes.
Hooray. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank
you.
you. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so then the next up on our agenda is the last one, and that is 599 Somerville Avenue.
Sarah, I will be recusing myself from this case.
All right, so noted. Thank you, Courtney. Have a good evening. All right, will the team of 599 Somerville, okay, we're already ahead of me. I will warn again, we're trying to be concise. So please, sort of limit your presentation to what has changed since the last time we reviewed this. And you get a 5-minute warning should you be approaching the 15 and 20-minute mark.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. My name's Russell Preston. I am the Design and Development Director for this project. I think we have Nina Chase and Rob Elfer joining us. Rob is from Studio Troika and Nina's from Merritt Chase Landscape Architects. We have a short presentation for you all tonight. Just to confirm, you can see my screen, right? Seeing some nodding heads. Great. Okay, so I'm going to take you all through this. I think we had, a great discussion about the building last time. We spent a lot of time with the design team, really digging into, I think, kind of 3 general areas that you've asked us to look at. I think the facade color, sort of the materiality of the facade, the design of the facade, particularly how it relates to the seam between the 2 facades of the building, and then really looking at the landscape buffer on the northern yard of the site. So, from a design standpoint, this is really trying to be it's an MR3 building. It's only 43,000 square feet. We're trying to deliver a commercial building that's at a neighborhood scale and is really lab ready. So, the direction you all gave us last time was really to look at option 1, which was, sort of a 2 facade scheme, but look at the relationship of the seam between them and rethink the color. So we've really brought in a much more gray and darker brick tones to the facade. We've gotten rid of the red brick, as you see on the left. And the other thing that we have done is really start to study where along the facade shall that break between the 2 facade designs need to occur. And we'll get into that more in detail. Looking up Somerville Avenue from the west, this was the previous design, was sort of a red brick building, punched openings on this side of the facade, really thinking about how it relates to the kind of post-industrial sort of buildings that are around this area of the neighborhood. The direction you all gave us was to really incorporate those lighter brick tones, kind of more in the grays family, which was from the option 3 that we showed in the previous meeting with you all. And then to really think about how that side of the building can remain a sort of contemporary language. And really, you know, what I'm excited about with this part of the building is the kind of pedestrian scale of the brick detailing and how we have an opportunity here to really enhance that with this sort of elegant kind of punched opening facade here along Somerville Ave. Looking at the previous design here from Kent Street, you know, it was important to us to kind of understand how this facade not just related to Kent Street, but how it really related to the corner of Spring Street. And I think, you know, the commission pointed out, I think a appropriate move here, which was to, you know, slide over this seam between the two facade designs and what that does is essentially line up with the lobby, the demising wall in the lobby. So I think the kind of fiction here we're creating with these two facades, I think will be further enhanced by really the relationship it will now have with the lobby on the ground level. And then I think, you know, a lot of care has been given in the architecture here by Studio Troika and kind of the width of the piers, you know, kind of jockeying all of the relationships of the facade with the column grid inside. So that really do have, I think, what are really two successful building facades there. The previous design, looking down from Spring Street, you know, we really tried to scale that corner element to be able to turn the corner and kind of feel like it was at a scale similar to the other mixed use and kind of multifamily buildings along Somerville Avenue. And then I think when we kind of reincorporate the color palette that you directed us to, you know, I think kind of being more in those whites and grays and, you know, lighter tones, I think starts to tie in the building a little bit more to the clapboard and kind of wood architecture rising up the hill here. You know, I think the goal here from the development team standpoint is to really build, you know, a durable building, you know, really build something that not only speaks to the architectural heritage of sort of corridor, kind of a mill building inspired kind of facade here, but something that's also contemporary and really going to speak to the kind of nature of what could be happening in and around this building. So really, you know, looking at light gray bricks, kind of medium and then darker gray, you know, really trying to speak to these being both very different facades, but also in a similar palette of materials. And then the sort of perforated metal panel that could articulate not just the spandrels between windows, but also other of the sort of ornamental elements, the canopies and sound screens on the roof. And then really grounding the building at its base with a really durable material like, you know, granite here, so that we really have a nice water table there at the bottom of the building. And you can see here just a few more facade views. You know, this was the previous design. And I think we had a lot of internal debate about, you know, which way to shove this kind of seam. And I think the commission kind of directed us in the right way. I was convinced by some of the studies that our architecture team did that really, I think the success of the building on the left now is really this punched opening. It really is accentuating this horizontality of the facade. It really has a strong sort of presence along the street with a rhythm to the storefronts. And then I think the corner element is really expressing the kind of vertical nature of those piers and really tying into, you know, kind of holding that corner. And the scale of that is now, I think, more appropriate with other buildings on the corners of the street. You can see the previous design here and then reworked with the direction from the commission. You know, I think, you know, further study, you know, we'll talk about landscape as well, but I think, you know, really looking at this corner has been important from not just a public realm standpoint, but how that facade will talk to this expanded kind of parklet or larger curb bump out. And then I think what also we've been working on is really to kind of understand how these buildings from not just the ground level, but all the way up through the facades can really speak to them both being their own facade. So you'll see we've kind of really worked the detailing of the penthouse noise walls, some of the cornice elements, you know, really kind of a lightweight kind of contemporary language to it, but still trying to make them feel as if they're separate buildings. And I think just to reinforce the kind of preferred direction that the commission focused us on, I asked the design team to really look at, well, what would happen if we did expand the corner building, the right-hand facade, further down Somerville Avenue. And I think this sort of study reiterated the success of the preferred scheme here and how that kind of corner element of the building I think is right-sized now. Another element that you asked us to look at, and I think this is some guidance we'd love to have from you all tonight, is understanding that the success of this part of the ordinance is really to create a sort of smaller increment of facade to kind of break down the overall massing. And I think the seam between those two facades, we've had a lot of study on it. I think this approach is really looking at kind of making a non-event, something that just when you're walking past it along the sidewalk, it does not, sort of is a forgotten moment. And that sort of gives a little bit of breathing room between these two facades. And we've also been in a design constraint here with sort of a pier, sort of a structural member right there. So we've really tried to kind of create a condition here where, sort of as a non-event as you stroll along the sidewalk. The second option here, option 2, is thinking about kind of creating a minor bay to the left-hand side, to the left-hand facade, and kind of continuing the kind of detailing of the brickwork, the string course that coming along at the shop front cornice, and then kind of creating a minor bay in that regard, but have the similar language to the left-hand facade. You can see that there on the sidewalk experience. And then these are just side by side. I think the success of these two facades is really starting to talk about how their proportion of them is right sized now. I think their overall length is right sized. And I think this seam is really just a detail we'll continue to refine, I think, with your guidance as we move forward into further elements of the building during the next neighborhood meeting. These are just some facades we've included in the package to kind of give you the overall view of each side. This is the northern facade, and I think worth noting out, the percentage of glass is very much reduced there along the northern facade. Really trying to speak to right sizing that facade for better privacy for those neighbors. Now, related to that, and I think it might be helpful to talk through the landscape and the rear buffer, landscape buffer as well, because they're kind of related to some of the architectural moves that we've made. I think overall the site, it's a very hard site. It has a lot of coverage. This is wide loading dock along Spring Street. And so I think the layout of the site has been really about how do we stitch this better, this new building better into the neighborhood than what exists there today. Very little landscaping around the site today. Its relationship to the abutters to the north is very much sort of right at the property line. So what we've done after a number of working sessions with the team after our last commission meeting is really look at several moves here from a site standpoint. I think we've had several discussions with the city staff on the streetscape along Somerville Avenue. I think we'll continue to work with them on refining that in the context of not just the sort of corner bump out and the bus stop, but really they've given us direction that we really need to work within the city's specified standards on those elements. We've had several discussions around the sort of corner bump out and how to right size that. The city has asked us to look at crosswalk there, which we're going to continue to study. And then moving up to the northern landscaped yard, in talking with the neighbor on Spring Street, really looking at addressing some of their concerns around the sort of active driveway in regards to noise. So we've really extended that landscape planter around all the way to Spring Street and are conceiving new fencing there as well in relationship to that abutters parking lot and driveway. And then we've looked at taking advantage of how the kind of complex the topography is. So you'll see on these drawings we have 3 sections we've cut to kind of illustrate how we think we can use this landscape yard to really kind of connect better to the experience that the neighbors to the north have of the project. And then I think the final element here is really looking at the sort of change to an intensive green roof there at the top left corner, and really thinking about how that part of the building can actually become part of the rear yard experience to the neighbors to the north. So just looking at that section in particular, this is the deepest part of the site. And what we've done is really raised that landscape yard up so that visually it's a kind of connects better to the rear yard of 44 Pittman. And then by the sort of setting of all the grades here around the site, we've been able to kind of bury the building into the hill. And then with the inclusion, kind of the change to an intensive green roof, we'll have an additional amount of tree plantings and sort of more robust landscaping there. So I think overall, you'll get this kind of layered and terraced view that will result in, approximately 23 feet of landscaping in that situation. Similarly, looking as we kind of step more towards the east, this is at the shared property line with 46 Pittman. We've worked with the team and sort of the civil and construction managers and all that, kind of really think about how we could do a similar treatment here. We're really raising up that landscaped yard so that it is at the approximate height of the abutters rear yard, so that we're kind of maximizing the experience of that landscaping to the residential neighbors to the north. And then I think that effectively, kind of really reduces the scale of the project. You're really not seeing the ground level of the building there from the rear yard. And then what you'll see there is the small sort of 4-foot egress path that needs to come out of the rear egress stair of the building, which really will just be a kind of utility path running along the rear facade. And then, the final section here is kind of looking at a cut through the driveway, kind of just off Spring Street, and really the inclusion of that new planting strip there with sort of the shared kind of driveway condition we have with the neighbor to the north. So I think overall, we've kind of really worked to maximize the kind of very, kind of unique site and kind of stitching in this infill building here with all the various situations we have with the topography. And kind of doing that, we've enhanced the green score. We were at 0.31 before. We believe we're at 0.35 now. We're going to continue to review this with the staff. And then I think overall, the kind of material palette has evolved a bit. We've kind of really brought in the standard streetscape elements, furnishings, materiality that the city's directed us on. And I think we're looking to continue to get input from the neighbors and the community at our next neighborhood meeting about the kind of opportunities we have at the parklet or kind of corner or bump out situation, and we'll further to refine that design as we move forward. I think overall, kind of taking a kind of very harsh sort of hard site and kind of bringing in as much green and kind of landscape as we can, given the context of this kind of unique property. And then, I think this final image here is really tying together this idea that it needs to be a Main Street building. It needs to kind of participate in the improvement of Somerville Avenue. And I think thinking about how, this sort of parklet can be designed with the community, and then kind of the further study the city has asked us to do with a crosswalk here, and kind of right sizing this bump out in the context of all the other kind of moving pieces with the bus stop and other elements of the streetscape. So, we're really excited about the project. We're going to continue to work with the staff to refine the planting list and kind of really working with the kind of specified native species in the ordinance. And then I think overall, we're thrilled with how the building's come together. I think it's a beautiful building, and would love to hear your input on it tonight. So thank you.
All right, how do we want to proceed with this discussion? Does anybody want to just dive right in? I mean, I don't mind actually starting. Russ, can you go back to the slide that shows the dark slot between the two?
Yeah, of course.
Particularly the view from the, it has this view from the street. Is that actually recessed bricks for a zipper detail?
That is the thought there, yes, that there would be some sort of intricate kind of masonry seam there to kind of tie that element into the two facades of the both left-hand and right-hand side of the building.
There's something I really like about that zipper. I noticed that, and that's the way it read to me. So anyway, that's my only comment.
So I took a look at this presentation before you had presented it very quickly with the materials that were submitted and just flipped through it. And when I came to the image of the shifted reveal, the change in the change in the proportions of the building, I thought, wow, that feels really successful. And I think it is. I think the change in proportion of the two, shifting that away from the center, it gives, some type of programmatic justification for the differentiation of two different building facades by aligning it with what's happening on the ground floor. And I think it just works proportionally. It feels good to me.
Yeah, our team is pretty pleased where it landed as well. I think in our discussion a few weeks ago, it was a bit of a puzzle if that was the right spot. But I think overall, we're all really happy with it.
I agree, Tim. I feel like now your vertical section is more vertical and the horizontal section's more horizontal. So I feel like it is really, it's supported by the way they're differentiated facades. So I think it's very successful also. I think just in general, I feel you've done a lot of work, number one. And I feel like you've thoughtfully incorporated, things that we sort of left dangling after last conversation. And I think the architecture is quite successful. And I have very little comments about it. I'm a little confused by some of the landscape, how the grades meet the building in the back and stuff like that. I would be interested in hearing Andrew's comments on sort of the development of that. But I feel like the architecture, everything about it, it has sort of fallen together in a really good place for this project, given its program, its scale, and its ambitions.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I can jump in. Oh, sorry. You want to go, Tim?
Just one maybe quick one, just as long as we're on this slide. This shows that corner condition where there's the lobby at the corner, and then I'm realizing that there's a stair connecting the different levels at that corner. So it's different than the other window bays on this facade. And I'm just curious about, I guess your attitude towards that, the stair on the inside, whether there's any further opportunity to create differentiation at this corner. So perhaps the repeating bay isn't just simply wrapping around the corner on this side in the same way it is on the back side, but something related to that taller space on the inside.
Yeah, I think, there's been a lot of discussion about that stair. I think we have aspirations around kind of, looking at the well standards and all, and like really making sure that people use that stair. So I think the idea of it being light and connected to the outdoors was part of that. I think the view on the screen now is really, understanding that this kind of pavilion, sort of holding the corner here, it really is going to be seen at kind of this oblique. And thinking about that sort of, character of the building feeling clear around the corners. And I think once we started to look at kind of enlarging that corner pier or adding some bay elements or all, it started to break down the scale even further, and some of the elegance to the kind of proportions of the bays and all started to break down. So I think, rather than celebrating that stair, we kind of wanted to make it part of the kind of larger kind of pavilion nature of this kind of masonry structure here at the corner. Does that make sense?
I think so. It makes sense. On the other hand, it is, so many of the buildings of this kind of typology are center core buildings where it's all tenant space around the perimeter. So you have a very similar facade. And this is unique and different in that it does have a stair on the corner, that kind of big vertical communicating element. So I guess as a refinement, I'd encourage you to continue to explore whether there's the opportunity to celebrate that somehow. To differentiate the corner while still, I think, accomplishing what you're talking about, Russell, which is the kind of the singular pavilion-like nature of that piece.
So I would definitely echo some of the comments I think that Tim and Deb have already said. I think architecturally from the front, the building looks great. I think the ship and the massing works. I like how it looks from the front a lot. I think that's great. With regards to the landscape, I think we sort of covered last week that the streetscape seemed really solid. The parklet seems like a great idea. The landscape in the rear remains sort of, it remains a concern for me. I think that you guys have clearly put work into trying to come up with ways to make the 10-foot minimum work better. But for me, it remains, to me, a case where the minimum per zoning does not seem adequate. And I appreciate the changes in the topography to try to get it to the levels. It does reduce the planting areas in the places where we're raising it significantly with the walls, because the walls themselves are taking up a certain amount of that 6-foot space at this point. But yeah, I just think the answer is provide more space rather than try to see how we can get that up and down in the grading to work. But the rest of it I really like.
Great.
I got maybe two questions for Rob. Wondering if you could talk a little about two things. One is the coloration of the brick. I think in general, the tonal similarity between the two feels good as well. And I know that was something we talked about the last time. Within kind of that gray and dark gray range, there's kind of a broad variety of approaches. And I'm thinking there's a mock-up that I go by almost every day in the Seaport right now, the gray brick building. I think I can't remember the name of it, but it's a really textured, kind of weathered gray brick, as opposed to something that's more solid. And I'd be curious to hear about what you're thinking there. And the other question I had was for the more vertically proportioned facade, there's kind of the black vertical bands. And I can imagine what that is separating the brick pier from the window, but I'm curious what you're thinking where the vertical band is separating kind of dark brick from dark brick at the top and the bottom, how that detail would work.
Yeah, I think if you look at this point, I think the concept of what the actual final brick would be, I think there's definitely more time to research that and look at options. There's actually, I believe the building you're looking at has more linear brick that's textured. I think that's the one you're talking about, which is really pretty. So I think that we can play with that a little bit more in this as well. I think we've tried to, in this case, just be a little subtle and not shout too much. And it's the type of building that you don't want to try too hard with everything. So we really want to find that elegant, subtle feature and contrast between, or not contrast, but how all these elements come together. But I think we have looked at a slightly more texture. I think it's a little hard in these renderings to really have that come through. So I don't think we're imagining that it's complete flat, and it's definitely not a gloss brick, I think. So to answer that question, I think the linears that you're seeing, the vertical black strip, and I think you can zoom into it a little bit, that was kind of layering into that building a different layer of detail. So it actually starts to play with the planes of the building. So it's helping to emphasize the verticality, and then having these metal elements tie throughout the building. So that you go from the base all the way up to the top. So you have this commonality, the detailing that works its way through. Really thinking it's more like a thinner black, not as large bins as we were talking about in the first project you were looking at, but something a little bit more subtle, coming out about 3-4 inches. And that's kind of contrasting these metal accent panels. So really kind of creating a lot of layering was the idea behind this scheme in this part of it. And that trying to act as a contrast to the other one, but also bringing a tiny little bit of that detailing into the other building as well. So I think if you zoom across, you'll see sort of like hints of that detailing come into the other piece of it as well. A little hard to see in these, but. And just speaking to your question on the stair, the one thing I'd add is we definitely want to celebrate the stair. I think there are a lot of different ways to do it. I think that what these aren't really fully looking at yet are how are we going to start to see those interior elements from the outside? I'm thinking of it lit at night or in the day. So, you know, it could be things as simple as colors and the way that you get that kind of luminosity coming through some element of the lighting. Kind of like a Stephen Hall type effect is kind of what we've had in the back of our head for this. So I know what you're talking about, and we totally appreciate that. We'll definitely be looking at that. It is a rare opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Is the parklet on private property or on public property? The question that I had.
So that's on public property, and we've had a couple meetings over the last few weeks with the city staff and are digging into that in more detail now with them.
So how does that work, Sarah, if they're proposing something on public property, and who would be maintaining it? Who would be in charge of it? What is the condition of that? And it seems
Yeah,
like
that is
the
all.
staff likes it.
That's all determined with the division, and then usually part of a maintenance agreement with the city. If it's in the public right of way, there are different steps by which things go through. So if PSUF is amenable to it, then it will also need to be reviewed by mobility and engineering, and then built to city standards and using city usual materials if it is to be maintained by us because it's in the public right of way. But there are agreements and easements that can be put in place, negotiated to have the adjacent property owner maintain that to a different standard. So that will all be determined between, as I said, piece of mobility, and then to some degree with economic development often facilitates those conversations. Basically once a project is before the board for review, then there are a lot more details that are worked out from that legality standpoint.
And we've started those discussions with PSOF, engineering, and all of them. So I think further work has got to go into that as far as the overall streetscape, but they have been encouraging us to be kind of focus our creativity on the parklet. They all think it's, I think, a generally interesting idea. They recognize that having it, be something that inspired from the neighborhood discussions, and so I think further work is going to go into that, and we'll likely have to have some kind of maintenance agreement. I think what happens if someone runs a car into it at some point, who fixes it? Things of those nature, and we've started already digging into those details as we're starting to study the kind of request from the city to look at the sidewalk as well, the crosswalk across Somerville Ave.
All right. Is there anything else? Are we ready to vote? I don't mean to rush, but I feel like there's a lag in the conversation. So,
Well, maybe can I go back to the zipper? Between the two.
I just wanted to make one last, and when you're done, Tim, I want to make one last comment too.
Oh, sure. I guess maybe I'd be interested in hearing, Rob, your preference on which option you like. But I tend to agree with Sarah. I think the zipper idea is kind of something that is both architecturally consistent with the two buildings, but also something a little whimsical and fun. Somerville Historic Commission has this thing where they'll take really close-in pictures of different areas around the city, and you kind of have to guess where it is, and they send it out to people. And this could be something really I don't know, unique. They take the picture of and send it out to people to guess.
Yeah, and my comment,
Oh, go ahead. Go, Deborah, I'm sorry.
oh, my comment is, I feel like this is one of the most successful long buildings that needed to, you know, have definition between them, but holds together in my mind as a single building. It doesn't, it feels something authentic about it. And so I applaud you guys. I feel like, you know, you really pulled this. I think this is pretty, I think it's pretty tough to do, you know, to accomplish that, to divide this up into 2 or 3 sections and have there being integrity to the whole project. And I feel like you found a nice balance. I've been looking at the details, you know, looking at it at a larger screen, and you know, the way the brick work, you know, there are datums that carry across, but you know, datums, you know, I think there's just a sort of an integrity to the way it all holds together, and I'm pleased by that.
Yeah, like what I'd say is that I really feel like the comments that you gave us and the feedback you gave us last time really helped us kind of push it to another layer, and I really feel a lot better about the building. And so thank you for that. And I was actually really thrilled, Sarah, when you said, "Is that a zipper?" Because that really was the idea. And you probably know as architects that we probably studied 30 different versions of this until we ended up at one that we really liked. And we really like the kind of I love it when somebody can sort of figure out the word that you're trying to put out there as an architectural element without actually saying it. So that's actually kind of fun. So yes, we prefer this one.
And Nina, you should stop talking. You've talked enough today.
Russ is taking the lead, so, but happy to answer any questions.
All
I think we're
right.
ready for a vote.
Okay, I think we are too. Andrew, remind me if the last meeting, we obviously voted, I'm assuming, on a preferred facade, as this was the one, I believe we did that vote.
Yes, that is correct. Tonight, the only vote is on if the design guidelines have been met.
Okay. So then
I would just
I'd actually like to make one more vote. So we do have to make a design, quote, not modification, but I would like to make a motion that we approve the zipper option, the dark brick reveal between the 2 facades.
a motion to approve.
I second.
Right, that's seconded by Frank. Thank you. Roll call vote. Deborah,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
and Frank.
Yes. Yes.
I think that's a clarification. Just to make sure that we have all the selections chosen. Is there do we want to designate a priority design guideline?
Yeah, there's one that I'd like to consider designating. It's design guideline E. Vents, exhausts, and other utility features on the building facade should be architecturally integrated into the design of the building and should be located to minimize adverse effects. I think especially given the tightness of the site, its proximity to the street, its proximity to surrounding residential properties, I think that's going to be really important to understand as the project moves forward through the process, especially when it gets to the planning board. So I know all those things haven't been identified yet. We didn't really focus on it. One item that came up last time was the exhaust of the parking at grade along the rear property line of the building, which I think is problematic. If there's the opportunity, there is the opportunity to exhaust it out the roof of the building. So I think that's something that should be explored, or it should otherwise be demonstrated that there's really no adverse effect to exhausting at grade acoustically or in terms of exposure to dirty air or otherwise. So I'd like to designate that one.
All right, so we have a motion. I'm going to say, Tim, this is your motion to designate design guideline E regarding vents and exhausts as a priority design guideline moving forward. So do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Andrew. Roll call vote. Deborah?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
And Frank?
Yes.
All right. And so then I believe our final motion needs to be that all design guidelines have been met.
So moved.
Moved by Deborah, seconded by
Second.
Second.
Frank. Seconds that motion. Roll call vote. Deborah?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
And I believe that's the end of our votes this evening. So congratulations to the team. Thank you very, very much.
Under 40 minutes too.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the guidance. Appreciate it. We'll look forward to moving the building forward now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank
Have a
you.
great
Have a
evening.
good evening.
Bye all.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, team. Then we just have one more motion, and that I believe is to adjourn, unless Andrew G is going to tell me I missed something again.
Nope, we are all set.
Move to adjourn.
All right,
Second.
motion by Deborah, seconded by Frank, quite loudly. And a roll call vote. Frank?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Andrew?
Hard yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
All right, thank you all. Meeting adjourned at 8:09 p.m.
Oh,
Well
Woohoo.
done.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Thank you.
everybody.
have
Take
a
care.
have a nice dinner.
Bye.